friends, it's just me, Emily. Welcome to my podcast where we explore how to discover your soul's purpose, embody your essence, and live a life in alignment with your truth. Today, I am joined by Mel Fioravanti. Did I pronounce that right?
Fioravanti.
Mel Fioravanti. It's Italian.
Totally, I'm used to it.
And Mel has not only been a mentor and a healer for me, but she's also become a friend. And I am so excited to share her wisdom with you all on today's show. So a little bit about Mel. She is a self-proclaimed witch. No joke, when I met her, she called herself a witch. So she is a witch, a wise woman, and a healer. She has devoted several decades to studying the human psyche, addiction, grief, sexuality, trauma, creativity, spirituality, death, ritual, and the mysteries of life. Being an experiential learner and teacher, she has traveled the world to learn from renowned teachers in various modalities such as trauma resolution, altered states, transpersonal modalities, grief, love, eroticism, energy, and magic. She weaves these diverse lineages and wisdom into unique experiences that result in profound transformation. And I have witnessed some of her work, her medicine firsthand, and yes, absolutely agree in the profound transformation. So welcome, Mel, to the show.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you.
I love having you here.
I love being here. Thank you so much.
All right. So we're going to dive right in. So I recently began working, we began working together in the realms of Tantra. Mm-hmm. At the time, I was exploring my sexuality. I was in a relationship where we were kind of having some issues around sexuality. And so I really want to use the beginning of this to just dive into like, what exactly is Tantra?
Great question. I like to start out by saying that there are as many definitions for Tantra as there are practitioners, because everyone's definition of Tantra is a little bit different. There's different aspects that people focus on because it's truly a whole life philosophy. It's a way to live each moment of each day. Mm-hmm. So in the West, where we love instant gratification and all things sexy, we generally hear about Tantra in reference to sex. And it does make sex absolutely incredible. But to me, that's pretty far down the line of what it can do for your life. So for my own personal life, I like to go with the definition of it is a way to include everything. It's a way to make everything sacred and have the ability to hold multiple truths at one time, to widen your own capacity for pain and pleasure, and to find and activate your own unique energy and relationship to your life force to really be able to awaken on this planet and pour that into whatever you want to create. And that can often be a beautiful relationship with other, but it starts with a beautiful relationship with ourselves.
Right. I love that. And I think I went into our retreat together thinking it was all about sexuality, but came out learning that it was so much more. And I heard you say one thing that I kind of want to tease out, and that's that sexual energy is life force energy. So it makes sense that it would apply to other realms. How would you explain, like, how do you see the benefits of Tantra or the practices of Tantra being applied in everyday life outside of sexual practices?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because every culture refers to this energy differently, but every culture has a word for it. So it's sometimes called Kundalini, prana, chi, life force energy, creative energy, sexual energy, arousal, and so on, and many more. And it's really just a way to talk about like, what is that energy in our body that really we can all, I start by talking about the feeling of arousal, because we can all relate to the feeling of arousal in our body when we become turned on by someone else or ourselves or images or whatever.
A cup of coffee.
Yeah, exactly. A nice bath, whatever brings arousal into our bodies. That energy is the energy we're talking about. And often it gets kind of stuck in the process of we just relate it to the genital region and the releasing in that region. And I think that that energy carries so much power. It is literally the energy that drove you to create new life.
Yeah.
Your two beautiful children came from the activation of that energy in you and your partner. So what it is capable of on this planet is like everything. And
Yeah.
it's not just humans, it's plants, it's everything around us that is alive came from this energy. So thinking about it in that way, we can funnel it into what we want to create as well. We can funnel it into becoming more awake and alive human beings and be able to hold many truths at once as we go throughout our day, responding to our environments instead of reacting. And for me, coming into right relationship with my life force energy was essential to me finding my work on this planet and how to bring it forth, because I felt very stuck and in shame and in a lot of old stories and patterns and in the head of like thinking what I should do instead of feeling what I should do.
Yeah.
And the more access I have to my own energy, the more alive I feel and the more access I have to my intuition, the more I can love the people around me while loving myself instead of choosing one or the other.
Right.
And it allows me to weather, the world right now is a pretty heartbreaking place. And it's also filled with so much magic in this moment, because that is what Tantra is. As when it gets darker, it also gets lighter. So we have these opposing forces on the planet right now that we're all saturated in. And it can be quite intense if you don't know what to do with it. And Tantra gives us a way to feel it and funnel it and use it.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, when you're talking about these opposing forces, the light and the dark, maybe it's like wanting something sexual, but also feeling guilty about it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how specifically Tantra does give us the pathway to be able to hold both ends of the spectrum?
Yeah. Yeah. And when it comes to sexual space is a great place to start.
Okay.
Because arousal is an intense emotion that we can activate and cultivate on demand for the most part. And for some people, that is with sight, watching porn. For some people, it's touch, masturbation. For some people, it's energetic. I'm an energetic, so there's a lot of things that activate me. But then from that place, like it's easier to activate our arousal than say, if I was to say, Emily, can you get very angry for me right now? You might be able to, but you're definitely gonna have to think about it. You'll have to make your way there. Arousal is an intense emotion that for most of us is on demand. So it's a really good one to start with. How do I hold intensity in my body? How do I hold charge in my body? What do I do with it? Because whatever we do with our arousal is what we also do with our grief, our pain, our ecstasy, our bliss, our fear, our insecurity, all of it. It translates across the board how we hold intensity and charge in our body.
Yeah.
So arousal is an amazing template to start with. And it's also, I believe that pleasure is the most healing thing on this planet, and amongst other things, but it starts to repattern what it actually feels like to become a more whole being in alignment with ourselves, that it can involve juiciness and pleasure and joy and bliss. And it will, as we build capacity for those things, also give us more access to our pain and our grief and our fear.
Yeah.
But it is all of it. As we grow one, we grow both. We cannot cherry pick the intensity of emotions. And so right now, I do see it as like, it's almost a necessity. It's like a boot camp for what our world is going through and where we're headed, that I have a wider capacity to hold all of it.
Right, right. So, and then how do you actually expand that capacity using Tantra as a practice? Would that be kind of the quadrants, or or is it just the the practice of moving energy in your body? Like, I want to get really practical here.
Yeah. Okay. So there are, I like to think about there's 4 different ways that I can kind of relate to tantric philosophy, if you will.
Okay.
There's practices I do with myself. There's practices I do with another. mostly romantic, but it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be. I have a very tantric relationship with my primary work partner.
Mhm.
And
It's just funny to
I have
think
to
about.
add that, I have lots of partners, some of them, but a tantric relationship with how I approach the world around me and my
Yeah.
community and the collective at large, and a tantric relationship with how I am in divine relationship with spirit, whatever I consider to be a power greater than me.
Yeah.
Um, and what that usually looks like is moving towards the discomfort. For me and for most of us, it's because we have such we move towards bliss and joy easily,
Mhm.
especially if it involves anything that's going to activate our dopamine. We usually just inherently move away from things
Yeah.
that feel like they might even if we get a whiff of this could be painful, this could be uncomfortable, this could be revealing, it could be, we move away. So for me, a very tantric moment to moment practice is when I have anything come up in me that feels like shame, that feels like insecurity or
Mm.
fear. Is first, I always say, like, recognize that you're not actually in a dangerous situation. So this wouldn't apply if I was in a dark alley and someone was approaching me with malintent, but that's not usually what's happening.
Yeah.
Usually what's happening is I am very afraid to my own emotional landscape. And there isn't actually any harm that can come from being with it. So in leaning in and in being closer to myself, being closer to the bubbles of shame that percolate, say, during my own pleasure practice, there might be things that I find like I'm not making sound even though I'm in a house totally by myself and I find myself holding my breath. A tantric way to bring expansion to that moment is to move closer to the thing that is scary
Yeah.
and make sound
Yeah.
and breathe into my body and know that, like, I'm safe. It's just me. And being able to observe what are my responses to my moment to moment,
Yes.
to my moment to moment environment that are actually keeping me stuck, that are
Yeah.
actually keeping me small, keeping me contained. It's a way to invite expansion into each moment.
Yeah. What's coming up for me is like you're almost the participant and the observer at the same time of every experience that you're going through.
Mhm.
I thought of you the other day because I had just put down money on an Airbnb in Bali. And I was like, oh my God, like having a moment because it was a lot of money. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And I could like feel it in my body. But I was like, I'm just gonna cancel it. And I was like, fuck that. No, I am going to lean in
Yes.
and like just
Yes.
be with the discomfort that's in my nervous system right now because I'm so safe. Like I could probably cancel at any moment, but just sat down, anchored in, breathe, set up the altar, and I was just like with it. And it took about like 15 or 20 minutes for it to like dissipate, but I was like, I'm okay. And I just felt like I had expanded my capacity for that
Yes.
response that I have to like letting money go
Yes.
in that moment. So would that be an example
It's a
of
perfect, I got chills, a perfect example because you're able, that is holding two truths at once. You're sitting with and leaning in and paying attention. Like, one of the primary things I talk about in all of my work is that we most of the time have all of these micro ways that we abandon ourselves throughout
Mhm.
every day, all the time. And some of them we're conscious of, most of them we're not. But that's a moment of modeling the opposite of that, of, okay, I feel scared and I'm going to sit down and be with it and
Yeah.
also try to be able to hold the voices of my head that are giving me logical reasons why this might be scary and the voices of my heart and body that are a full body yes.
Yeah.
And just being able to be with them and know, like you said, that the fear reaction in our bodies is usually completely over dramatized. And it's usually based on a lot of past experiences that may or may not have carried real weight and consequence. But in this
Yeah.
moment, they don't. And it's those moments, if you can sit down and recognize and be with yourself of like, this is super scary and I'm okay,
Yeah.
that really the next time that that happens, that fear comes up in your body, you'll be one step closer to yourself. Your
Mhm.
baseline is closer. You trust yourself more in each moment. So your intuition is stronger. And it's a
Totally.
feedback loop of goes in the other direction instead of a lot of us spend our time feedback looping ourselves to disassociate from ourselves,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. No, I felt like I like rewrote an old story and like patterns. It was really cool.
It's so
It was
cool.
awesome. Yeah.
And it really raises the baseline like forever.
Yeah.
And the cap always raises too, so you'll always be in a state of growth. But
Yeah.
it's quite something how quickly you can repattern things like that and how exponential the internal landscape of like being at home within yourself and trusting decisions that you make can be.
Yeah. And through the lens of Tantra, it's really helpful. I get it, friends. Dating as a widow is complicated. It's normal to feel guilty for wanting someone new. You might be wondering, has enough time passed since my person died, and am I even ready to date? Maybe you're feeling really insecure about talking about your deceased loved one and about your grief with a new potential partner. And then there's the question of, how do I honor my deceased loved one as I open my heart to someone new? The nuances of dating as a widow are a little bit different than dating after a divorce or a breakup. So that's why I created a self-study course with dating and relationship coach and therapist, Michelle Mutis. We want to make dating as a widow feel easy. We want you to feel confident and self-assured around who you are now, what you want, and around your loss. I'm talking about feeling secure about talking about your deceased loved one, your loss, and your grief on dates. Feeling clear about who you are and what you desire in your next partner. Normalizing feelings around intimacy and wanting to be with someone new. Knowing how to navigate complex emotions that come up during the dating process. Feeling a connection to your deceased loved one as you open your heart to someone new. And believing that your next soulmate love truly is out there. We do this by helping you release common blocks around dating as a widow. Then we help you get clear about who you are now so that you can call in your next soulmate love. Some of the topics that you'll learn about are how to tell if you're ready to date, how to stop feeling bad or guilty about dating, how to become your own matchmaker, i.e. getting to know yourself and what you want so that you can call in a compatible match, how to own your widow status and not feel like you're damaged goods or that no one else will love you because of your loss. And then how to date in the modern world, because I don't know about you guys, but when I met my late husband, there was no such thing as apps, and now apps are like the way to go. So we'll cover online dating 101. I've had several widows and widowers take this course, and I just want to read one testimonial that really stands out. Going through the Love After Loss program was probably one of the best proactive steps I've taken to move forward after my loss. The very idea of taking off my wedding band haunted me. I was very curious about dating, but not at all ready to take action. I doubted myself that I could choose or vet a prospective date. A week after the program ended, I was ready to take off my wedding band. I feel very confident, almost empowered now in my ability to spot a potential date that I might connect with. I also truly understand now that opening myself up to love again in no way diminishes my loss or the love I will always have for my late husband. Emily and Michelle are gifted in what they do, and their message resonates with me on many levels. Just do it. From Susan. So if you are ready to open your heart to new love, or maybe you're just curious or about dating, this might be a program for you. If you're curious about dating and finding that next soul level Chapter 2 love, then head to the link in my show notes. So we explored a little bit about how to use this in day-to-day life. I know, however, that you do a lot of work with couples. So when you are working with couples, what are they typically coming you for in terms of, is it their sex life? Is it their love life? Is it just relationship in general? Or
Yeah. Everybody's so different, especially these days. There's, I mean, I think we've always been different. We're allowed to talk about a bunch of different relationship dynamics these days. However, most people are still in a heterosexual monogamous relationship. Or monogamish is a great term.
Yeah, I know.
Right now. So, and in those relationships, what I see often are two things: that people's needs in the realm of love and people's needs in the realm of sex are usually quite different. And there's a lot of people speaking to this these days because it is kind of unique to our culture in the here and now. Esther Perel's an incredible example
Love
of
her.
someone who
Yeah.
does a lot of work on, stability versus freedom.
Mhm.
So there's
Yeah.
conflicting needs is a number one thing I would say that couples are not consciously coming to me for, but that's what's happening, is there are conflicting needs within the relationship of the two individuals, but there's also conflicting needs within each individual. There's also like within me, there's parts that need stability and security and parts that need autonomy and freedom. And so when we're dealing with a relationship, we're really dealing with one of my favorite teachers told me once, and I really live my life this way and conduct my sessions this way, is that when you're talking to a couple, you need to make sure that you understand that you're talking to a table full of people. You're talking to all of the parts of one individual, all of the parts of the other, and then the parts of the we that they've created, because we all have new parts we create with each partner. So you're talking to a table full of people in essence, and all of them have needs. And most of them are going to be in contrast in any given moment. So there's a lot of need to stay current with who you are that we don't do on a day-to-day basis. And there's a lot of need to leave room for your partner to be an individual and stay current with who they are, which we often don't do on a day-to-day basis either.
Yeah.
And in the realm of sex, that you brought up, that my partner and I have devised this kind of system that we've been working with people based on these polarity quadrants is what we call them, because in the realm of sex, what I see often is some sexual teachers these days are calling it reversed polarity. I don't love that term because I think reversed implies that the opposite would then be normal. I don't like normalizing anything, but we are in a time where most women are hyper masculine in their energy. We have a lot, with all of the freedom we've gained, some that we've backslid. We also, there's a lot that we're running and being in charge of every day. And the men have gotten more into their feminine, into their own desires, they have a little bit more space and room because we've taken the masculine, and we have the masculine because they've taken the feminine.
Interesting.
So this concept it works well in partnership. It doesn't work well in sex for the most part.
Okay.
And the way that we've decided to work with that is creating these energetic quadrants that have nothing to do with story. They don't have to do with your childhood. They don't have to do with any trauma or anything you've been through. All of that's important. But this work is about, where are you in this exact moment today? Where do you want to be? And how can that movement happen? And if you want to create more charge, which equals more passion, more intensity in the relationship, especially sexually, how can you do that? How can the two of you embody different poles? And then when you want to move back to a more neutral energy and watch TV or plant the garden, or how do you do that? So there's ways that we've kind of tried to make it more simple and take a lot of the psychology out of it and just deal with the energy of what is in each moment. It's easier to approach. It has less shame and blame, I find, when talking to people.
I love this work. And this is what we kind of dove in on the Tantra retreat that I did with Mel. I want to kind of divide this into two parts because I want to get into the quadrants because it's so powerful. But I also want to just go back a little bit to the parts work. If you can just go a little bit more in depth for our listeners who aren't familiar with parts work and what that is and why that presents as such a struggle in relationships. Like, if we haven't done our individual work to understand what parts are kind of play within us and how that then starts to show up in a relationship container.
Absolutely. And thank you for backing that up so that there can be more explanation around it. And I want to caveat, I am not a trained psychiatrist. I have done a lot of work over the years. I have been in the healing realms for 25 years in many cases. So this will be my interpretation of what parts work is.
Love it.
But a lot of what I'm talking about is based on internal family systems, which is referred to as IFS. It was developed by Richard Schwartz, and it's a way to understand the complex system inside of ourselves, and that understanding that we all have unconscious parts that are operating all the time, and those parts are often kind of identities that you can single out. The cool thing about parts work, I think, is it takes the sting also out of if I have to face some really horrific part of my shadow that's been impactful and hurtful to my partner, and I have to sit in the shame of that and apologize and be vulnerable. That's difficult for anyone to do. When we can have a little bit more compassion on ourselves and look at ourselves as like, I am just like a basket of parts, and some of them were formed from trauma. Some of them were formed from just moments where I didn't feel loved, and I made a decision of how then to get and receive love. Some of them were formed from, most of them were formed from real survival moments that I needed at the time. And I developed as a way to continue to show up in the world and continue to love people. So it's important to remember that our parts were created out of survival.
Yeah.
And not out of, just trying to, because one of my parts is I'm a 13-year-old who wants to burn everything to the ground immediately. And I call her the anarchist. So when she comes up and she comes in, her main goal is to cause pain, to show pain.
Yeah.
And when I was unconsciously running that part, I would cause pain to my partner and people around me in order to show how in pain I was. Because there was a time in my life where I felt deeply damaged and broken, and I didn't feel like anybody noticed. But as an adult, running that unconscious part in my now relationships that are healthy and beautiful, it was really destructive, causing pain to people that I love, that I can very easily just ask for what I need now. I've created an environment where I can ask for what I need now. So becoming conscious of that part of me and also caring for her, not relegating her to the shadow, not cutting her out of my life, pretending she doesn't exist, but really pulling her in and closer. And when she comes online, being like, okay, this is my work is to sit with my anarchists, not my partners. And that he can sit with my adult Melissa and I'll sit with this 13-year-old asshole. And that way we can have more acceptance and compassion for the whole of it.
Yeah. I love that. And I think what's beautiful is when you do have two conscious human beings that come together and they know their parts, maybe you do have a moment where you're like, oh, the anarchist just showed up and you like unleash and you act unkind. You can apologize and say, hey, I'm so sorry. Like that was just, this part of me. And they know that too. And then it just opens up more space for vulnerability and compassion and understanding. But if you go into it with two unconscious, people with two unconscious parts, it's just like, it's hard to understand what is actually happening in the relationship.
For both
people.
Right? Like we've all been there where even in this specific part with this specific partner, I've been doing this in relationships since I was in 7th grade. So there comes a moment in every romantic relationship I've ever had where I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing the thing where I'm like destroying this. And I can't stop doing the thing. I don't know where it comes from. No matter how many mantras I tell myself it's an unconscious part of me that like takes over.
Yeah.
So when we dedicate time to really finding out who is back there pulling the levers, it's not that they don't show up anymore. She shows up, but now I see her coming. I kind of know what she needs, or I can at least alert the people around me that it makes a huge difference, don't you think, when your partner comes to you and is aware of what they're doing, even if it's destructive, versus just becoming that identity and having a lack of awareness about it.
Because it leaves room for grace. And it's like, we're all works in progress. We're all trying our best, but it just gives you like more tools to work with one another,
Absolutely.
My problem is like, I'll know the unconscious part of the other person and they like kind of know it, but I feel like I know better. And I'll be like, oh, that's just your like childhood wounding from and your trauma. And they're like, oh, whatever, Emily.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah. That's a really good one. Point out, it goes so well.
It goes great. They love it.
Everybody loves that. I've done it a lot.
Working on that.
Yes.
Okay, so then going back to the quadrants and how you support couples, is like when they come to you trying to explore either their individual sexuality or in their relationship, would the quadrants kind of come into play then? Or okay.
Yeah, I think we originally kind of started playing with them in sexual space and realizing there's I'll try to condense this as much as possible, and then realize it applies to all space and all relationship and everywhere all the time. But the origin of them, there's a lot of Tantra and sexuality and relationship teachers that speak about masculine, feminine energies. And I already did it in this conversation. And what I find often, what we mean by that is not gendered, but it's hard to not have a pre-programmed response to if you are what you think to be a masculine man, and I tell you you're in your feminine, it's triggering. It's loaded, So we developed the wording attention inward and attention outward for those states. That masculine energy is attention outward. It's looking at our surroundings, securing the perimeter, making sure everything is safe and in its place, and paying attention to the other people in the space and how they're doing and what their needs are. Attention inward is exactly the opposite. It's being able to have enough safety that can rest for a little while and you aren't in charge of anything and you can really be with your inner landscape and what comes up as a result. But we also don't think that it's just a sliding spectrum that just goes back and forth. There's another dimension to it, which the language is often used dominant and submissive. And those are, again, very loaded terms. Some people like one or the other. Some people are afraid of one or the other. There's all kinds of images of bondage that come up. So if you're not into that, and even if you are into that, you're going to want to be one or the other. And if you aren't, it's scary. So we use the terms driver and passenger. It's very simple. Attention inward, attention outward, driver, passenger. And with those 4 settings.
So driver's Dom. What we would call Dom, right?
Yes.
And then passenger is...
Yes, and the passenger is submissive. So it's very much, it's just who's directing the action and who is along for the ride.
Yeah.
And that can be out of the bedroom in a way of, like, we often refer to if people are in quadrant 1 and 2, which we refer to as attention outward driver, quadrant 1, and attention outward passenger, quadrant 2, that might not be the best combination for sex, but it's an amazing combination for projects around the house or things that you want to accomplish together. It's like what we call teammates, right?
Yeah.
So looking at, it doesn't have a high level of charge. There's not a lot of polarity in it, but there's a lot of harmony in it. And so when we talk about the quadrants, it gives us a really good idea too. If you come home from work and you're exhausted and your partner's home and they're kind of in a good mood and they've got some snacks made, you can automatically see, like, where are you? Where do you want to be? And how can you support each other without story, without like, oh, well, you got to stay home all day. And you just like, maybe you could hold the attention outward for a bit and I could just rest in myself. And in that place, I might find some arousal or some desire for intimacy because I get to recharge with my own energy. And that brings me to a natural place of wanting to be outward and putting my attention on you and your desires. But if I've been sucked dry all day, I'm not really going to want to care about your needs right in that moment.
Yeah.
So
1000%.
Yeah. It gives a good language for things.
It's so helpful. And you guys, we're going to link an image in the show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll get a visual of it. It's so helpful. And I want to just put it tease out a couple more examples just so everyone kind of drop into this. But when I learned about this at the retreat, I'm a solo mom. I'm running my own business. I had no idea. I've always considered myself a highly feminine, again, attaching to that word, but energetically, I'm extremely in my masculine. And so in my last relationship, he would, initiate intimacy. And I'm like, fuck that. I just want to go and read a book and be alone. I don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I was really needing to be in my feminine, but the other person was my partner was wanting in his feminine too, attention inward. Right. And for me to drive, which I was I'm so I guess I'd be dominant, right? And maybe you can break this down better because you're
Yeah.
like, have
Yeah.
the language, but like, it gave us a tool to be able to be like, to actually like look at the situation really objectively with non-attachment and just be like, hey, I'm like super in my masculine right now. Like what I need is just to go a little bit inward. And if you want intimacy, can you pleasure me,
Mm-hmm.
and just take me working completely out of it
Yes.
because that's not what I'm available for right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It's a great example. And in the way of like putting in our terms, it will almost make it easier to understand. And this example is such a classic example for couples in 2024 in this country that are heterosexual. This is a classic example of course, you thinking you're in your feminine a lot because you're a beautiful, feminine, creative being.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at just the terms attention outward and attention inward, by being a single mom, running a business, owning a home, all of the things that you do all day, your attention is always outward. So with that definition, you would be in your quote unquote masculine.
Yeah.
And our partners, one of my favorite things to teach, because it always flips things on its head in a way that gets people's attention and sometimes triggers them, which is great.
Love it.
Is that the example of a woman being in the kitchen and coming downstairs and wanting to be in her underwear because she just does not want to wear clothing. But the way that our sexuality gets co-opted in relationships is then our bodies are, if they are exposed, they are available to our partner. And even if we're in a beautiful relationship and very much in love and attracted, it still doesn't need to be an invitation for that. And that's where we find the patterns of people starting to more and more cover themselves till one day you're in sweats in July. I'm sure we can all relate to a relationship like that. I spent a lot of time in that place. And when we really look at attention outward inward, if you're in the kitchen in your underwear and your partner approaches you with desire, that's a really common complaint from men. Like, well, she never wants to and I always initiate. If the man is initiating from his own needs and desire, from a place of wanting to meet his desire, then he's attention inward. He's not outward. And then that means he's in his feminine. Yeah. So if you're being approached by someone in their feminine, it will put you automatically in a role where you have to be attention outward. And of course, that's not what you're going to want to do in that moment. And teaching men that when you come at a woman grabby and lusty, you're actually in your feminine, not your masculine, does make them immediately go, hmm? And so it just kind of levels the playing field of like, okay, so then yeah, if your partner comes home and she's exhausted and you're feeling sexual, no matter what gender, how can you support them to go attention inward first? To give them time to really rest in themselves and recharge and not have to be attention outward. What can you do? There's sexual things you can do. There's plenty of non-sexual things you can do. But yes, like you said, it simplifies. It takes the sting out of a personal attack conversation. It's just an energetic, I need to be inwards.
Yeah.
And I'm available for anything that you're going to be outwards and driving for.
Totally. Thank you so much for listening in to It's Just Me, Emily. I hope that you enjoyed the show. If you did, it would be a great honor if you could subscribe and then leave a review. And if you do so, I will send you a beautiful hardback copy of my book, Love and Grief, to the first 20 people who subscribe and leave a review. When you do that, it just helps my podcast get boosted and more people will be able to come in and view the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in another episode.